Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Allison and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to create this really cool looking gnome guy. Let's get started. All right, so what you guys will need is this cute little gnome guy. You can find him on our website or pieces similar to him, and you can do this technique and this instruction on any piece like him. You can, like I said, you can find it on our website, and we'll link that down below in the description, or you can come on in studio and find him in studio as well. But you'll need one of him. You will need a sponge and some water, some brushes, your colors, and a paper towel. So the first step that I want to do is kind of really show you what kind of colors we're looking at here. So we're going to be using number 31, 67, 68, 29, and 70. And then if you do like the little kind of ornament things and the little details on their hat, then we used number 46, 47, 83, 27, and 18 for that. So if you wanted to do those little details, those are the detail colors, but these are the base colors that we'll be working with today. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to take my gnome and I am going to go ahead and start with the gray on his beard. So I like to use a fan brush. A lot of people are intimidated by the fan brush because it looks kind of different and we're so used to little kind of squared off brushes that we'd use for acrylic. But the fan brush, in my opinion, really picks up the color and distributes it the best. So I'm going to take some gray here, the number 70, and I'm just going to you want to really load it up because we're going to want to do a really thick, nice coat on their beard here. So usually with everything, I highly recommend putting 3 coats of paint on everything. The reason is if you do 1 or 2 coats, you will see kind of the brush streaks and strokes of what you did. Sometimes that effect is beautiful if you were to do some brush stroke flowers or something like that. But for this project, we want everything to look nice and solid. So we are just going to do 3 coats on everything. However, for his beard, we are going to do our sponge off technique, and I'll kind of show you how that works here. But first, we're just going to do a really nice thick 1 coat of paint for the number 70 on his beard. Like I said, you'd usually do 3 coats, but just for this particular piece with the beard and with the sponge off technique, you just really want to do 1 nice, really good thick coat. If you are a really thin painter, and what I mean by that is you kind of just keep brushing and don't really load your brush, which is totally fine. But if you are kind of one of those people, you will maybe want to do 2 coats for this. But I just like to do 1 nice thick coat just to get it going here. And I'm going to let this dry just a little bit here. Your piece is kind of ready for its next coat when you see that's shiny right now. So when that's all nice and matte, isn't shiny anymore, it's ready for its second coat. Like I said, I'm not going to do a second coat on his beard just so we can do the sponge off technique, but for everything else, that's a really good telltale that it's ready for the next coat. So I feel like it's still a little bit shiny, but for right now, we can go ahead and we can just start sponging off just a little bit. For the sponge off technique, you're going to want to take your water and your sponge, and we're just going to dip it in the water, get it nice and wet. I like to submerge it and then squeeze it in the water to get those little air bubbles out. You don't want your sponge soaking wet, but you also don't want it dry. You just want to give it a nice squeeze just so it's damp. But we're going to go ahead and yeah, he's almost dry. So we're just going to take the sponge and we're literally just going to wipe off our paint of what we did. And you can see here that we're going to rinse off our sponge just like when it gets a little dirty when we need to rinse off. But you can see already that the gray is staying in kind of the valleys of the beard, and we're wiping off the peaks. So the peaks are going to be white, the valleys are going to be gray, and that gives it a nice, really cool beard texture. And don't be afraid, this part's kind of messy. See, I got a little bit on his foot and everything, a little bit on his nose, but we'll be covering that up with other colors. So don't be afraid, this is kind of just a messy one. So you can kind of wipe it off how you want it. If you want a more gray beard or a more white beard, just keep wiping off until you're pretty satisfied with what you got. All right, I'm gonna clean it off one more time. Give it a nice squeeze. Just doing one nice little wipe over everything. Perfect. I'm gonna go under his nose here and I'm really kind of get a little bit more of that off. Perfect. So this looks really cool. It gives it kind of like an antiqued look or just like a really nice beard texture. It really shows through the texture after fire. So that's what it would look like before and after fire. So I'm going to move on to doing the hat. Like I said, highly recommend doing 3 coats of paint on everything you do. It makes it look its best. Again, I really like taking my little fan brush here. I'm just gonna paint all on the hat here. And you can see how I'm painting it on and it's really thick and it dries super fast. If you want to prevent that for your first coat, you can just dip your brush in water one time, kind of swirl it around and get your paint a little looser. And that way it goes on quite smoother. I don't know if you can see that, but it feels quite smoother with that. So for the first coat, I'm just kind of going for it with my fan brush for the hat. And then once I'm done with that, I'll get my smaller brush and I'll work around the details. It's great to do kind of your base color or your big areas first and then details later. It's the easiest way to do it. So I'm gonna grab some more green here and I'm gonna finish my first coat and I'll be right back. All right, so I did my first coat on the hat. As you can see, it's not shiny anymore. It doesn't have that sheen. And so we're all ready for the second coat. So this time I'm gonna start with the lip of the hat, the detail, just to show you guys how I do my details. So I find that it's easiest to control my brush and the details if I really load my brush up with the paint and kind of just go for it. And you kind of wanna move, I don't know if you can see, I kind of want to move my wrist more than my hand, if that makes sense. So you want to kind of brace your hand against something and just really kind of go for it and just move your wrist. If you move your hand, it's more likely that your hand is going to shake and that you're going to get a little wiggly line. In my opinion, like I said, it's easier to really load the brush up with paint than to try to go at it with a dry brush. That way you can kind of do your details kind of in one brush stroke and you don't really have to go over it a bunch to just get that coat on. It's really important to let your piece dry in between coats because we want to kind of like add a layer of paint. We don't want to kind of mix the layers together, if that makes sense. So I'm just gonna continue working on the lip of the gnome, like I said, bracing my hand and really moving my wrist to get that nice clean line. Perfect. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment down below. We will respond with an answer for you. So I'm just gonna continue with the hat of the gnome. It's pretty simple, just painting the whole thing green. As always, I know I talk a little bit fast, so if you need to, you can always slow down the video if you want, or you can pause, rewind, rewatch any part that you need to. But yeah, I will be back with my second and third coat of the hat done. All right, guys, so I just did my second coat of green. And I'm just gonna get started on the black here, just while I'm waiting for the green to dry. So a great way to kind of keep track of what coat you're on is just sit back and just let your piece dry. I know it's hard sometimes when you want to just either get it done or you're just having so much fun painting, but that's the best way to keep track of what coat you're on is to just sit back and let it dry. Sometimes if you just kind of go for it and just try to do your 3 coats, Sometimes you forget what coat you're on, and sometimes you only do 2 coats if you wanted to do those 3. So like I said, I recommend either sitting back, letting your piece dry, or to work on another section of what you're doing, kind of like I am here. I am starting off with the black, just painting. And we are going to be painting the black all over the back of the kind of shirt section and on the shoes and around the beard. So that's where we're going to be putting all the black. You can paint the bottom if you want to. Otherwise, it'll just come out the shiny white just like this. But you don't have to paint the bottom if you don't want to. So I will be back when my first coat of black is complete. Alright, so I did my 3rd coat of the green and my first coat of the black. I just want to go ahead and just take a moment to kind of show you guys how I do the details around the beard and the easiest way to do that. So I'm just going to take some more black for my second coat. I like to start kind of by my detail where I want it to be kind of precise and go that way. The reason is so that way I can kind of get that full base color on over next to the details, but I don't necessarily have to super worry and focus on the details here. So what I'll usually do is I'll do this all the way around, just kind of painting right next to and right up to where I want to put my details, or I need to focus on where my color goes. Like I said, I'll usually do this all the way around where I want the back color to be. But just to show you guys, I take my little detail brush here. I'm going to dip into that black, and I'm just going to go ahead. Usually I'll let this dry even, but so I can brace my pinky on it. But I'll just go in and I will just kind of be really gentle and really careful. But this way you can kind of see where you want your details the best, because it will kind of dry on the other places and you can see, and then you also don't have to worry about kind of using your little brush to kind of really get right next to the details. We used our big brush for that. So you really can just use your little brush and really just kind of focus on the details here. It's the easiest way, in my opinion, to do some details that are like right next to another color where you don't want them to overlap, where they're just going to sit right next to each other. So I'm going to do my 2nd and 3rd coat of black, and I will be back. All right, so I did my 3rd coat of black. You see it's still shiny, I just did it. But while that dries, I'm just going to start on the little guy's nose. So I'm going to dip into that number 68 color. And right now, the beard should be super dry, so you can rest your hand on the beard and go for it. And like I said, the easiest way to do this is to kind of load up your brush and kind of start away from it an inch closer and then just go for it. And like I said, move your wrist rather than your hand, because if you do your hand, sometimes it'll shake. But if you rest your wrist and move your wrist with the brush, it's much easier to do your details. So I am going to finish putting 3 coats on the nose, and I am going to make sure everything is all nice and dry, and we can get started on our details. Alright, so I got my 3rd coat of white on here. The skin color, so we're going to take our white next, and we are going to do some details like you see on this little guy's hat. If you don't want to do these little ornament guys, you don't have to. If you want to skip those, you can just go to the end of the video and we'll wrap it up. But if you want to do these little details, then keep on watching. Alright, so I am going to take my white detail bottle. These are excellent. We have these in studio. If you want to come in studio, we have these in every single one of the colors. If you don't have these, if you're painting at home, you can use a little tiny brush if you want to. That's totally fine. you'll just need to do 3 coats of paint with a little brush. But if you wanted to use a detail bottle, which I recommend using, we have them in studio, and then you can also order them on our website as well, actually, if you wanted to use these guys at home. But for this, I'm going to be using the detail bottles just because you only need 1 coat of these guys, and they're pretty easy to use. But when I open my detail bottle, I like to kind of just, like, if you saw that I did it just out of instinct, I like to kind of test it out and make sure there's no air bubbles at the top. But then just on the edges of these stars, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of take the edge, and I'm just going to draw just a line straight down, just on all the stars. When you're working with the detail bottle, you want to kind of have it so your detail bottle kind of floats just like a little bit above the piece. I find that's easiest because if you take it and you kind of rest it and kind of scrape it down, you can risk like scraping up the paint that's underneath. So I'm just gonna go around and just on the edges of these little stars, just go ahead, just draw little lines down. You can do really long lines, you can do short lines. It's up to you, it's your piece. But yeah, I'm just gonna take little lines down on my little stars. And then once you're done, I'm just gonna do this side for now. I'll do the rest later, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna do that. And then I'm going to grab, first, before I do the little kind of ornament guys on here, I'm gonna do the little light green little garland leaf things. First, I'm gonna take my light green and I'm going to first test it out, make sure there's no air bubbles on top. Perfect. And I'm going to go from the opposite side of the star. So I did my little white things over here. I'm going to start them from over here. Like I said, if you don't have a detail bottle at home, that's totally fine. You can just take a little detail brush and just do the 3 coats of these guys. But the detail bottles are so cool, so useful. So I'm going to be using those. So I did that one down, so I might do this one up. It's up to you on how you want to do it. But yeah, you just want to draw the line, and then you can either do, you can do one of 2 things. You can either take it and you can just create a V, or you can start from the outside and work your way in like that. It's up to you. But I'm going to go ahead and do the white lines and the little light green details all around, and I'll be back. All right, so I put those details all around the hat on all the stars. It's up to you if you want to do it on just like a couple accent stars, if you want to do it on all of them. I just did it on all of them because that's what we did on the example here that we fired. So much like this guy, we are just going to do just little Christmas bulbs all over where we put those little strings. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do that. You can either do that with your little detail bottle. You can grab that with your little detail bottle, and you can just kind of go for it and just do a little detail. Now, remember when I talked about how you want to kind of hold it a little bit above your piece? You don't want to hold it like super far above your piece like that. You just want it just so ever so slightly above it, just so you don't scrape the paint underneath. But if you do hold it really far above or something, that you will get the paint a little too thick, and that is no bueno. So you can either do it with a detail bottle like that, or if you are painting at home, you can either take the back of your brush. Let me just, I don't have any of this color here right now, so I'm just gonna dump some here. You can take the back of your brush like I was talking about. You can dip it in your color and it makes perfect little dots. So you can take the back of your brush and just kind of dot it, and that just makes little perfect polka dots. So you don't have to sit there and try to do 3 coats of little dots. That it's much easier to just take the back of your brush and go at it. And if you do that, you do only just need 1 coat just with the back of the brush. So I'm going to take all of the colors and I am going to go around and fill in where all the bulbs go. All right, everyone, I did all of the little ornaments and all the little details on the rest of the hat. So now comes the last part. I also used color number 90, the red, for some bulbs too. I forgot to mention in the beginning that we used some red too. So if you wanted to grab some number 90, you can do that. Otherwise, let's get started. So for the splatter and kind of how we got all the white kind of splattered on the gnome here, there's a couple ways to do it. The first way to do it is to grab your brush. There it is. And I'm going to use the black here. I'm going to move my gnome far away. I'm going to use the black here just so you guys can see on my little table paper here. You can dunk your brush in the paint. If the paint's a little thick, recommend just getting your brush a little wet, just dunking it in the water and getting it a little loose. It works the best for this method. If you want to get some paint on your brush, you want to hold your finger out, and then in making an X with your brush, you just want to tap. And you see how it's making splatters all over my table paper. So you can do it that way. That makes kind of big, flat, like fat splatters there. Otherwise, you can take an old toothbrush. You can dip it in your paint just a little bit. And if you run your thumb along it, it creates kind of a spray. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I'll show you up close when we do it with the white. But so the toothbrush creates kind of more of a fine splatter, and the tapping it with the brush creates more of a thicker splatter and a more messy splatter. So it's up to you. I'm going to do a little bit of both, but mostly I'm going to use the toothbrush for the gnome here. So I'm just going to grab him. And if you do, see I put him far away and I still got a little bit of paint on him. If you're doing this at home and you worry about the mess, it's totally fine. Everything comes off just with water. So if you take some cleaning solution or just some water, you can wipe it off of any surface, including the bits. I'm just going to take a sponge, just kind of wipe out where I got those little spots of black there, and they'll just come right off. So we're going to start with the hat. I'm going to take my toothbrush, dip it in my white paint. Now, when you do this, sometimes the paint in the toothbrush will travel all the way down to the plastic base of it. So if you do it with your piece kind of like this, sometimes it will drip and get a big fat glob of paint on your piece. To prevent that, you want to kind of hold it a little vertical and kind of spray it like at a vertical and far away from it, just because if you don't want to get, see, I don't know if you saw that, but one big fat glob just dropped on my table paper. So there went again. So to prevent that from going onto your piece, you kind of want to hold it a little far away and hold your brush a little vertical to it. Maybe hold your piece a little vertical. But I'm just gonna splatter there. And then if I do get some globs on my piece, which I got a little bit on his beard, again, you can just take that sponge, get it wet, and just kind of just wipe at it. But to prevent that, like I talked about, you can hold it kind of vertical. I hold it kind of horizontal so you guys can see. So that's where I got those. But don't worry if it gets on his nose or anything. We got it on his nose over here too, so it looks kind of cool. But I'm gonna do his shirt now. So again, and I'm gonna hold it vertical this time to make sure I don't get any globs. I'm just gonna dunk and splatter. And this one's messy, this project messy, but like I said, everything comes off with just water. So now that I did my initial splatter with the white here, I'm gonna wipe off, this is where a paper towel comes in handy. I'm gonna wipe off my hands. Then I'm gonna grab my brush that I was using here, rinse it off. I'm gonna lay my gnome flat. Just a little bit. You want to make sure that your little ornaments are as dry as they can be. But I'm going to lay him flat just a little bit. very carefully. I can move my camera here so you guys can see. And then I'm going to take some white, and just like what I talked about with that, I want to just go for it. Do some more messy splatters here. You can see I kind of do my first splatter over here just to get that initial big glob of paint off, and I go for it on my gnome. So I'm going to keep splattering until I'm satisfied, and I'll be back to wrap it up. All right, now that our table paper and our hands are completely covered in paint, that's how you know you're done. So this is what our gnome looks like all completed. He is ready to be fired. So if you did this project at home, you want to wrap it back up in your bag, bring it back to Color Me Mine, and we'll get him all nice and fired. So I'll just do a nice little, this is what he'll look like before fire and after. So looks pretty cool. And after fire, as you can see, your piece will get shiny, and the paint will also get much darker too, so don't worry, we promise we gave you the right colors. Alright guys, well that completes our gnome project. If you want to see some other projects that we'll do, you can go ahead and subscribe to our channel. We'll be putting out some more projects here, some holiday themed projects and some Thanksgiving projects coming up. But yeah, subscribe if you want to see more. Otherwise, you guys have a good rest of your day.